Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and the Legends, and welcome to part 2 of our 5-part Guilds of Ravnica limited set review. Today we're going to focus on the Dimir Guild. So we'll be looking at all of the blue cards that do not have watermarks, and then all of the cards that have Dimir watermarks within the set. So if you're thinking about playing this guild at the pre-release, hopefully we'll give you some information to help you out. And just generally, if you want to play Draft or Sealed with Guilds of Ravnica, this will be the series for you. So quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support the channel. One of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon down below. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save some cash while you support the channel. And, as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. And let's get into today's cards. We'll begin with the blue cards that do not have watermarks, starting with Capture Sphere. This is a solid piece of blue removal for limited games. It'll be good in Dimir, it'll be good in Izzet. You could even splash this in another build and it will do work for you. It's not perfect, doesn't take care of all situations. If the creature has a mana sink or something on it, then it's not going to prevent that. But 99% of the time, this will be good enough for 4 mana. It has flash, which is nice. You can hold on to it a little bit longer, and it also taps the creature, so you don't have to wait for the creature to be tapped or put it on and still worry about taking one hit or anything like that. Some of the effects that do that typically cost a little bit less, but this one for 4 is going to take care of you there and have you covered. Devious Cover-Up. It's a forecasting cost counterspell, but what I do like about this particular one, especially in this limited environment, is the fact that it does exile the spell. So it doesn't go to the graveyard. There's a lot of different graveyard mechanics that you'll find in this set. Golgari has Undergrowth. Of course, there's Jumpstart and Izzet. So there are reasons that you might want to exile the card when you counter as opposed to just letting it go to the graveyard. On top of that, you may shuffle 4 cards from your graveyard into your library. That works well with Surveil because when you Surveil early on, you might be trying to get some of your bigger spells out of the way to hit your lands. Later on, you might want another crack of those cards. Also, if you Surveil a lot during a long game, you may be in danger of decking yourself, and this does turn the clock back a little bit for you. And putting your best cards back into your library for some big late game plays is not the worst thing in the world by any means. You don't want to gum up your curve with this, considering it does cost 4 and it is a common, so you'll be able to find these. They should be relatively plentiful. But a 1 of or 2 of in a deck that blue is one of the primary colors will feel pretty good. Also, if you have 2 of these, you can juggle them and reuse the ability. Disdainful Stroke. This one's a reprint. You're probably pretty familiar with it. This is nice and limited because it does take care of the bomb cards, right? It's not going to take care of everything, but you know, the big creatures or the big spells that you care about, Disdainful Stroke will simply counter them for a blue and 1. You can splash this into any deck basically if you need it. That's nice. Very good card to run, and it's a common. Drowned Secrets. I actually like this card a lot. It's a rare. You're not going to see it a whole ton, but when you do, as long as blue is one of your primary colors, I would play it. It does a couple things for you. One, you could mill yourself, so don't forget that. Especially if you're in Izzet colors, that could become very relevant. Milling a Jumpstart card into your library is going to feel like you drew a card, so you could find value there. Even Dimir has some graveyard recursion. That might even work to your advantage occasionally. But a lot of the time, you're going to aim this at your opponent. Every time you play a blue spell, they have to mill 2. In a 40-card deck, they could start getting light on cards if the game goes long, and you might be able to deck them. Even if you don't deck them, you're putting pressure on them. They have a clock. They're going to start worrying. They might make a mistake, get too aggressive just because of this spell. So I do think it does a lot for 2 mana. The only thing I would warn you about, though, I mentioned this earlier, but there are a lot of graveyard shenanigans in this set. If Undergrowth is something they're all in on, or even Jumpstart, then perhaps you could be helping them at times. And if I have a really bad game 1 with this, I'll go ahead and side it out. But again, I'll main deck this if I have enough blue spells in my deck, because it only costs 2 mana. I think there's enough value here, and it's worth the risk. Guild Summit. Alright, this is another one of those cards that cares about gates. Before we talk about the card in particular, I just want to talk about that strategy first off. I don't know if it's a great idea to open your sealed pool or necessarily sit down at the draft table thinking you're going 4 or 5 color good stuff and then picking up gates and some of these gate cards. However, you open your sealed pool and you don't find a lot of cohesiveness there. But you can play the gates and you can play some of these cards, so then maybe you do go 4 or 5 colors and you try that strategy. In a draft, I don't think you start there, but if you realize once you get through maybe pack 1, part of pack 2, that whatever guild you were trying to get into got cut off and now you're in trouble, well, this is a nice fallback plan because now you can start grabbing guild gates, taking some of these cards that a lot of people will pass and not value very highly, and then also take any good card that comes up no matter what the color, and you might be able to hobble something together that actually could be decent. I do like the fact that once you figure out that you're going down that road, just take the best card in every pack, and then once you get to the middle, later portion of the pack, you still could have good, useful cards coming to you that no one else wants, the guild gates and cards like this. So let's talk about this one in particular, though. Not my favorite. I mean, you want to make sure you have a lot of gates if you're going to use this thing. It's a 3 casting cost enchantment that does nothing on its own. It has to have gates either in play or coming into the battlefield. It also requires you to tap those gates when it enters the battlefield to get the card draw after you already paid 3 to cast it. And remember, the first card you draw is just a replacement. It's not really card advantage yet. I would consider playing it, though, if I have enough gates. And I'm thinking probably no less than 4 gates. Maybe 3 gates, but 4, 5, 6 gates. If I'm in that ballpark, then this gets a little bit better. But definitely not if I'm like 1, 2 gates. It's just not going to do anything for you. Leapfrog, this one's okay. I mean, it's a 3/1 for 3. I don't like those stats. Occasionally it will have flying. If I have enough instants and sorceries, I may consider playing a copy of this just because early on in the game especially, I might be able to get across with 3 damage, 6 damage, perhaps if I'm super lucky. Also, it works with instants, so I could use it defensively at times as well. So it's interesting to me, but I'm going to try to find better things. It could be a good curve filler, though, for Dimir early on if you're just trying to find a way to put across some early damage before you get to your bigger win conditions. Izzet will definitely have the most capacity to activate the ability, and maybe it could keep the skies clear, so that's another thing to consider depending on your build. Murmuring Mystic. Okay, this is another card that feels like an Izzet card at first because you see instants and sorceries are going to result in 1/1 flying tokens. Nothing wrong with that. But this is also a Dimir card because Dimir, again, does have some instants and sorceries going on too, and they want to gum up the ground more so than probably any of the other guilds. They are truly a control deck. You're going to see that once we get into the watermark cards. They are playing some pretty tight control, so the more you can slow down an opponent, especially against more aggressive builds, the better. This also is a relatively high pick on common and draft that does not tie you down to one strategy. Muse Drake. I love cards that replace themselves. You know what? This is a common. You'll be able to find a copy or 2 of this if you want it. It is also splashable, which is kind of interesting, but if you want to move through your deck and give yourself presence in the air, this card will do that. Don't be fooled by the 1/3 stats for 4. I know that seems a little shaky, but being able to replace itself and grab another card, that is actually pretty awesome. Narcomoeba. Alright, this one is actually a decent card in Dimir, I think, if you have a lot of Surveil. If you have opportunities to basically play this for free, a 1/1 flyer for free is nice. It's going to build out your board state and help you hopefully get ahead of your opponent. Now, if you draw it, it's not going to feel good. You don't want to cast this thing for 2 and get a 1/1 flyer. It's just not good enough. It's not economical enough. But it's worth the risk, I think, just running it simply if you feel like there's a good chance you'll be able to get it for free. It's rare, which does feel a little bit awkward. I can see where this is a powerful effect, though. If this was a common and you could draft like 4 or 5 of these, that might get a little out of hand. So 1 is going to be fine. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. Omnispell Adept. This has some nice heft behind it, a 3/4 for 5, one of the larger creatures we've seen so far, but it doesn't have evasion. It's all about the ability, though. A blue and 2 to be able to cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. First off, it does allow instances where you might be able to play a card that's off color completely if you want to. Now, it's a little shaky because this is a rare. I'm assuming if you get this, you're only going to have 1. And if you're playing a spell that you have no other way to cast, it does require a very specific turn of events to happen. And I wouldn't go all in on that. But if I have maybe a splash color where I have a spell that might be a little more difficult to play or something like that, then this is a nice backup. This is also great for larger spells to come out earlier, even if they are in your color. Again, you look at this and you might say to yourself, all right, well, this is decent mostly for Izzet, but even Dimir or some other colors, because this is splashable, do have some big plays where this actually could help you cheat them out earlier and get ahead of the curve. So I don't think this is for every deck. You definitely want to have targets for this. If not, a 3/4 for 5 does feel a little underwhelming, although it could be a curve filler if you're desperate. But for the most part, you want to have some targets for this. If you do play it, it could be good. Passwall Adept. All right, maybe one of the better commons that you're going to find in blue. This is fantastic, especially for Dimir, but it's going to be good in any build. It's splashable too. I might actually play this if I'm not playing any other blue. It's that strong. I love the fact that target creature can't be blocked this turn for a blue and 2. It doesn't tap. As long as I have mana to pump into that ability, I can make as many creatures as possible unblockable for the turn. That's fantastic. It's going to help you push across damage, get you past board stalls. It also has good stats. A 1-3 for 2, especially in blue where you're trying to gum up the ground a little bit, is going to be perfect. I feel like it's good in the early game. It's fantastic in the late game. Selective Snare. This one's kind of interesting because there's a lot of good enters the battlefield effects in this set, and there's not any flicker abilities. There's not even that many bounce abilities. So I would consider playing this to bounce my own things if I had some really good enters the battlefield effects, especially if they happen to be on the same creature types. However, most people will look at this card and think about their opponent, and it's fine there too. Now, consider this. Even if my opponent isn't playing a whole bunch of the same creature type, I can still bounce their best thing for just a blue and 1, and that's not bad at all. And remember, I could also bounce one of my opponent's things, one of my things, if they happen to match. That could be interesting too. So I can see where sometimes you don't main deck this depending on your build, but bring it in definitely if your opponent happens to be running a lot of the same creature types. If they're throwing down a bunch of goblins in game 1, this could do some work for you for sure. Vedalken Mesmerist. This feels like a Boros card that somehow ended up in blue. Maybe you could splash it over there. Who knows? It could be decent. But what about the blue strategies? Is it good there? Dimir, it's okay as a curve filler, but if you have more high toughness 2-drops, like the one we saw a few moments ago, I think that's the direction you want to go. Dimir's not trying to be super aggressive. They are trying to control the board. So this isn't necessarily going to play into that strategy all that well, but sometimes you just need a 2-drop, so you might still play it. Is it? I do think it's better there, even though, yes, they have some control elements as well, but they also are relying on creatures that get bigger when you play instants and sorceries, and this could help them have a better line of attack. Wall of Mist. This one's another reprint. Not much to say about it other than this is probably best in Dimir. Again, you want to gum up the ground and slow things down. But for some reason, if you're not main decking this and your opponent's playing Boros or just something aggressive, you might want to sideboard it in for protection. Wishcoin Crab. This isn't too exciting. Is Dimir maybe interested in this as a 2-5 to gum things up? Maybe, and sealed. But I think for the most part, you're going to find better things when it comes to the 4 spot of your curve than this. Again, maybe I board it in against a more aggressive deck, but I'm going to try to avoid this one if I can. Alright, let's move on to the Dimir watermark cards, starting with the ones in blue. City Watch Sphinx. Alright, here's your win condition, or one of your win condition cards that you're going to find. It's a 5/4 flyer for 6. It's got evasion. Oh, by the way, when it dies, you get to Surveil too. You're going to see a lot of Surveil going on. So I've been talking about this and kind of dancing around it, but the main idea behind Dimir is it is a hardcore control strategy. You have ways to destroy creatures, you have counter magic, and you're going to have a few good evasive creatures. We did see the one creature earlier that could make something unblockable. That could be part of the strategy, but also creatures like this. Higher end of the curve, but it has a lot of power and toughness, also has evasion, and even has another ability attached to it. This is going to be a potential win condition for that particular build. Is it bad in other builds? No, of course not. I would splash this in builds that weren't playing blue, as a matter of fact. This is a very solid creature. It's going to be good in Izzet, of course, as well. Dazzling Lights. This one's okay. It gives you Surveil 2. It only costs 1 instant speed, and yes, it also is a combat trick. The combat trick might be more relevant in Izzet than Dimir, but Dimir is very interested in that Surveil 2. This is real cheap, and Surveiling 2 is just another way to move through your deck faster to get to what you need when you need it. Do you need a counter spell? Do you need a destroy spell? Do you need the win condition that you haven't hit yet? That's what Dimir is all about, expediting its way through the deck and controlling the board in the meantime. So I could see this being played in both of the builds, but maybe it doesn't always make your cut because there are some really good cards that could push this out. Dimir Informant. Alright, again, we're gumming up the ground with a 1/4, and this time when it enters battlefield, Surveil 2, very playable 3-drop. Again, the 3 spot in your curve, it needs to be relatively beefy, so a card like this is not going to feel bad at all. And again, surveiling is going to be the key to victory with Dimir. So for some reason, if I did not play this in the main, again, another card to bring in against aggressive builds. Dream Eater. Okay, this one's mythic. You're not going to see it a whole lot, but if you get it, well, wonderful. Again, it could be a win condition for you. Flash, flying, 4/3 for 6. Oh, and when it enters battlefield, Surveil 4. And bounce target non-land permanent and opponent controls. That's crazy. Okay, so it's doing so much for 6 mana. 6 mana is not going to be tough to get to in a game of limited, sealed, or draft. If you're lucky enough to open this thing, it is 2 blue, so it will be a difficult splash, but definitely Dimir or Izzet would love this. Enhanced Surveillance. This is one of those cards, if you have enough Surveil in your deck, try to work it in. It will be good with Dimir, especially, obviously, because of all the Surveil. Now, also, Surveil sometimes, especially if you get a little crazy with it early in the game, trying to hit your land drops or what have you, then you might be in trouble if the game goes long. Now, this does mitigate that risk a little bit, because you can, at some point, shuffle your graveyard back into your library and get your cards back. So that is kind of a nice safety valve just in case things don't go well. And that alone might be worth thinking about playing it if you truly are surveilling a lot. But again, just the extra surveil is going to be huge too in certain builds. Mission Briefing. This one's actually kind of cool. It costs 2 blue, so it's a little hard to splash. It's a rare. You're not going to see it a lot. But basically, it's kind of like a Snapcaster Mage ability on an instant. You also get to surveil too. So is this good in limited? Yeah, it's great in limited. You could say, well, maybe I only want this in a deck that runs lots of instants and sorceries like the Izzet deck. And yeah, you'd have more selection there. But this is good probably anytime you can run it. Because in limited, you're going to play sorceries and instants in some degree. And they're usually going to be removal spells. Just playing one of your removal spells twice in the same game actually could be game winning. And sometimes can get you past a board stall. So it's going to be good no matter what. As long as you can swing the double blue and you happen to get this, go for it. Night Veil Sprite. This is a good Dimir 2-drop. It's flying 1/2 for just 2. So if you get it out on turn 2, there's a good chance you'll be able to attack in on turn 3, maybe even turn 4, and get a couple surveils out of this. Perfect for what that deck's trying to do. This will be good in Izzet builds too. Sinister Sabotage. Alright, this is a counterspell for just 3 and just surveil 1. Sign me up. Dimir's gonna love this. Again, they're trying to control the game as much as possible. This is still good in Izzet as well. The double blue, again, makes it a little difficult to splash, but this is going to feel like relatively cheap blue removal in a lot of ways. Thouthbound Phantasm. Alright, this one's pretty sweet. Only costs 1 for a 2/2 defender. You had me there, especially in Dimir. I want to gum things up, slow things down, protect myself against those early Boros or aggressive creatures, right? I'm going to play this and be pretty happy with it, but as I surveil, it gets larger. Now, it can't attack until it gets to the point where it's a 5/5. And by then, it might not be super great because it doesn't have trample or evasion or anything unless I can give it evasion. But even so, if I just use this as a blocker, it starts as a 2/2 for 1. This is going to grow as the game goes on. And yes, your opponent will be playing larger creatures also as the game goes on. But if you can surveil enough, this can kind of stay in step with maybe what they're doing, at least for a while. I think that's kind of awesome for just the 1 mana. If I don't main deck it for some reason, again, remember it's there against aggressive matchups. Unexplained Disappearance. Okay, here's another bounce spell. It's really cheap, instant speed, just 2, and just surveil 1. So I like the value here. Again, you can hit your own stuff with this to either protect it in a pinch, or if it has a good enters battlefield effect, maybe exploiting that a little bit, or just hit your opponent's stuff to either defend yourself or tempo them, get in there with a big attack. So I like the flexibility. It's like common. You'll be able to find these. This will be good in Dimir, of course, with the surveil, but it will be good in any deck that needs something like this. It is splashable. Watcher in the Mist. Okay, if you don't get any of the fancy rares or mythics that are win conditions for Dimir, or maybe you get one of those uncommons and maybe 1 or 2 of these. A 3/4 flyer for 5, if you're controlling the board, is going to be good for you. It could win the game as long as you can keep everything nice and tidy and keep attacking in with this. This also gives you a surveil 2 when it enters the battlefield. Nothing wrong with that either for the 5 mana you're putting into this. So again, it's not easy to splash this being 2 blue, but Izzet would also be able to use this card as well. It's just very solid for a 5-drop creature in limited. Barrier of Bones. Alright, this one surveils and lets you gum up the ground. It only costs 1. Now, you're not going to need all these cards to gum up the ground, obviously. You're probably going to have more than you want, but you have a selection definitely in these Dimir colors. Blood Operative. If you can surveil with some consistency, this will be a decent card for you. I like the persistence here. Now, this feels a little different than the other Dimir creatures we've been looking at. They've been more evasive. This one's not super evasive or anything, but it is persistent, and that is the second best thing if you don't have a lot of evasion, I think. So playing this for 3, 3/1 lifelink, hopefully when it dies in combat so that you gain the 3 life, because later on you will pay that life to bring it back. Now, it can defend, which is cool, because sometimes those persistent creatures can't block. However, it does go from graveyard to hand, not right to the battlefield, and that's probably why this can get away with that when it comes to the design. Now, also, whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to pick a card out of someone's graveyard, which could be very relevant in this particular format. Overall, it's a rare, you're not going to see it a ton, but very playable as long as you have a lot of surveil, and you should in Dimir. Deadly Visit. Alright, this is one of those 5 casting cost destroy target creature cards in black that you always see that's sorcery speed, and it's always good, so guess what? You're going to play this and be really happy with it. This is a relatively high pick common for sure out of a pack and draft, and it also surveils 2 on top of it. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you can swing that double black in the casting cost, you're going to want to play this card. And of course it makes sense in Dimir. They're trying to control the game. Doom Whisperer. Alright, here's a mythic win condition that is fantastic if you're lucky enough to get it. 6/6, Flying Trample, pay 2 life, and Surveil 2, all for 2 black and 3. Yeah, this thing is nuts. And this is an awesome win condition if you're really, really lucky. Like I said, there's other options out there. You don't need to get this to play Dimir, of course. But it's going to make playing Dimir feel a lot more fun. This is also good in Golgari, of course. We haven't talked a lot about it in this video, but Surveil is also very good with Undergrowth. Mephitic Vapors. This is a sideboard card. It does Surveil, which is always nice, but this is something you bring in if your opponent is playing a lot of small creatures. Maybe they're making tokens in Selesnya or playing some small Boros creatures or something like that. Before the Mentor can take off, you can hit them with this. That's why you play it. I most likely wouldn't main deck this one, though. Price of Fame, another destroy spell, this time at instant speed for a black and 3. And it could cost 2 less if you happen to be targeting a legendary creature, like one of the guild leaders or something. That's kind of cool. And you get Surveil too? What? This is nuts. Okay. It's a very high pick, probably first pickable a lot of the time when it shows up in a draft pack uncommon, as a matter of fact. So you're going to love this thing when you get it. Again, it makes sense for Dimir because they're trying to control the game, but it's good anywhere. And this one is splashable. Whispering Snitch. This is, again, another card that's going to reward you for surveilling a little bit. So this is not bad. It also gums up the ground for 2 mana, so I'll play this, and as I go through my Dimir deck, I surveil here, I surveil there. Eventually that does add up a little bit. Helps you get to the end of the game a little faster. Artful Takedown as we move into the gold cards. It's instant speed, so your opponent can kind of crash into this, and you could get them sometimes. Or, obviously, just clear a path for you to get by. Tapping a creature so that maybe that flyer can get by for more damage, and then destroying another creature. Very good for 4 mana at instant speed. Very solid common again. Darkblade Agent, another card that's going to play well with, you guessed it, Surveil. And yeah, this is a 2/3 for 3. Those are actually pretty decent stats on their own. When you Surveil against Death Touch and Curiosity till end of turn, pretty good common. You'll be happy to play this, and a really nice curve filler that actually could do some work. Fits perfectly, again, into the early turns of what Dimir is trying to do. Especially giving this Death Touch makes the opponent sometimes have a tough decision to make. Do they block it and trade, or take the damage and let you draw the card? Especially against a control deck, that's a decision that they're not going to want to make. Here's another win condition creature, Dimir Spybug, and this one is pretty cheap. It only costs 2. It's a 1/1 flyer with Menace, so it starts off rather fragile. However, as you surveil, guess what happens? It gets bigger. It will get a +1/+1 counter every time. Again, a Dimir deck shouldn't have too much trouble surveilling relatively consistently, and once this even gets to like a 3/3 flying Menace, it can be real annoying. Disinformation Campaign. Alright, we've been using the destroy spells to keep the battlefield clear. We've been using the counter magic to protect our stuff and ourselves. Time to start making them discard as we draw, and that's what this is going to do for you. It's a little slow and clunky, granted. You play it, you draw a card, they have to discard a card. When you surveil, it gets to go back to your hand, but then you have to pay 3 again to play it. However, you play this 2 or 3 times over the course of the game, you're going to start feeling some serious value here. Definitely worth running. Atrada the Silencer. We talked a lot about this card when it comes to constructed play when it was previewed, but what about limited? Is it good there? Yeah, actually, I'd be happy to play it. 3/5 can't be blocked. However, it's a little weird because it will then get shuffled into the library once it does its damage, but it's also going to take out a creature, exile it, and when you do that 3 times, you just win the game. So that's kind of cool, especially in a 40-card deck where you're surveilling. You might actually be able to pull that off occasionally. And even if you don't, just getting the 3 damage in and taking out a big creature could be pretty awesome too. So this is fantastic if you happen to get it. House Guild Mage. I love Guild Mages, and this one is no exception. It's a 2 casting cost, 2/2. It is 2 different colors, so consider that. Maybe sometimes it'll be a turn 3 play, not a turn 2 play, but still very good. And look what you get here. Now, the blue and 1 untap, target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So it doesn't tap the creature. So remember that. It's not necessarily as good as you might think it is when you first glance at it. But if the creature's already tapped, it's going to be staying tapped, basically, if you need it to be. Black and 2, Surveil 2. You can see there's a lot of payoffs for Surveil. And Surveil itself is just plain good. This is going to be fantastic for you. Potential first pick uncommon here in a draft. Lazav the Multifarious. Okay, let's not even talk about that X ability yet. Let's just say this is a 2 casting cost, 1/3. And when it enters the battlefield, Surveil 1. You know what? Almost good enough to play already. Now, this is a mythic, so you know it's going to do something grand, and here it is. Pay X, and this becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name's Lazav, the Multifarious. It's legendary in addition to other creature types, and it keeps the ability. Okay, so you do have to pay the X. You have to get something in your graveyard first, then you have to pay the X. So it is a little conditional, you have to kind of work that out, but in a game of limited, I don't think that's going to be a problem for you. time's going to march on, creatures are going to die, things are going to happen, and you're going to be able to turn Lazav basically into your best creature on the fly as long as you have the mana to do it. Surveil is also going to let you maybe dump a creature into the graveyard if it becomes relevant that is actually better than casting the creature for some reason. For example, maybe you don't have enough mana to cast it because of color requirements, but Lazav can become it for any color mana. So that could occasionally rear its head as well. But for the most part, I think you just simply play this. It comes up the ground a little bit. It lets you Surveil. And then later on, when your win condition gets blown up, you can just turn this back into your win condition until they can deal with it somehow. And I think that's just good enough for 2 mana in limited. Mnemonic Betrayal. Okay, this is another mythic, and you won't see a ton of it, but do you play it in limited if you get it? Yeah, you do. It's Yawgmoth's Will for everyone else's graveyard but yours. So in some ways it feels a little awkward, but again, in limited, there's going to be targets. Maybe a removal spell. You just play this and a removal spell against them. Or you take one of their best creatures, perhaps, as long as you can afford to cast it after you pay the 3. So it does require a little bit of mana. You don't have to worry about colors, though, of course. After you pay the startup cost of 3, you're going to find something still with this, though. Even if it's something small, it might be worth it and it could turn the tables. I'm going to play this if I happen to get it. Nightveil Predator. All right, this is a little tight on colors, 2 blue and 2 black. But if you're in Dimir, this is going to be phenomenal for you. This is an uncommon that could be your win condition. Flying, Death Touch, Hexproof 3/3. This is an early pick uncommon. Once you know you're in Dimir, maybe not pack 1, pick 1 just because of the color requirements here. But once you know you're going down that road, this is an uncommon you're going to want to grab. It's going to be phenomenal for you. Notion Rain, solid card here. Do you like Read the Bones? Then you're going to love this. Cost 3, granted 2 different colors here, but Surveil 2, you draw the 2 cards, and then it will do 2 damage to you. The 2 damage, I'm not concerned about that. Being able to Surveil and then draw is going to be fantastic for you. Thief of Sanity. Okay, another rare, but a solid card again. Could be a win condition sometimes. 3 casting cost 2/2 flyer. This one's a little more fragile. However, this is very reminiscent of Nightveil Spectre. It's a little different, but what I like about this particular version of the card, it deals combat damage to a player. Look at the top 3 cards of their library, and then you get to choose one, so you get a little selection there. And then that card gets exiled. Now, the rest go into the graveyard, which does contribute maybe to a mill plan as well. But like I said earlier, that can be a little dangerous at times if you're giving them something to do out of the graveyard, like Jumpstart, or you're powering up their Undergrowth stuff. But then you can cast whatever's exiled with whatever color mana you have. And if this goes away, if this dies or something, you can actually still do that later. And that's different from Nightveil Spectre. The way this is worded, those cards are still available to you. That's actually kind of cool. So again, if you get the chance to play this, yes, play with it. It will be great for you. Thought Erasure. All right, again, we're attacking their hand this time. This is a Thoughtseize style spell. It only costs 2, and you get to Surveil 1. It is 2 different colors, though, but this is going to be awesome. It's going to give you information. It's going to be able to pick a non-land card from their hand to make them discard it. Again, discarding cards sometimes could work against you, but you're choosing the card this time, so this should be just fine most of the time. This will be fantastic to run. It's at uncommon, too, so you will see some of these. Unmoored Ego. This one's more of a sideboard card for me. It's a good effect, and yes, the multiples won't come in too handy probably when it comes to limited, but there's a few things you could do with this. If someone's getting real greedy on color, you could actually target a basic land with this. You can still only remove 4 of that land, so you can't like strip their deck of all of their mountains or something if they're playing Boros. But if they're splashing and getting greedy and they have basic lands, you might get them with this. Or you just hit their bomb. You got beat by some really big card in game 1. Now you know what that card is, so here's another opportunity to grab it before it even hits the battlefield. That's kind of awesome for just 3 mana. Whisper Agent. Good hybrid card here. I'm usually not a big fan of 3/2s for 3 because they trade down. But this one has Flash, so it can surprise the opponent, and also has Surveil 1, and we have seen how important that can be in conjunction with other cards. And like I said before, it's also just good on its own. So I would certainly play this common. One of the few 3/2s for 3 that gets my approval. Here's a split card, Connive and Concoct. Alright, let's look at Connive first. Gain control of target creature with power 2 or less. You're paying for it. I mean, 4 mana, even though hybrid does free up the colors a little bit. I would say, though, that it's still decent and limited. There's a lot of really good 2 power or less creatures you could grab. Guild Mages, for example. Concoct, Surveil 3, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you don't Connive, you have the opportunity to reanimate later. Now, Surveiling 3 into an empty graveyard and playing Concoct might not be the best thing, but at the same time, Surveiling 3 is not the worst thing either. So if you were backed into a corner and just had to go for it, you might get lucky. If not, though, Hopefully you have something that's a good target already in your graveyard that maybe you surveilled earlier when you couldn't afford it, or perhaps you just had something die during the course of the game. Well, here's a chance to bring it directly back and surveil 3 for just 5 mana. That's kind of awesome. Connive is probably good early, especially if you're behind, where Concoct is going to be good later to help you maybe get to the point where you can end the game. Discovery and Dispersal. This one is strong too. I love Discovery. This is great no matter what deck I'm playing, because Surveil 2, then draw a card, that's just solid. It doesn't matter if I have other things going on with Surveil. That is a very solid card, even at sorcery speed. If I could splash to get this, or any deck that's playing blue or black, I would just run this thing just for that. Dispersal's not bad either. Now, of course, the color requirements are a little stronger here, and maybe you might be in a situation where some decks can play Discovery and not Dispersal, and that's okay. I would still play Discovery. But if you can play Dispersal, yes, there are moments where this will be good for you. It's a bounce ability at instant speed to protect you. It only works on opponent stuff, but it is non-land permanent, so that's kind of cool. And it could maybe, again, make a hole for you to get by with some damage or something along those lines. It also forces a discard, and if your opponent doesn't have any other cards in their hand, then they'll have to discard what you bounced, which is good for you. It might be a way for you to get rid of a card that you don't normally have a way to deal with. Now, many times, though, players in long games, if they are using all of their cards, they will hang on to cards to bluff with, sometimes lands or what have you. So it might not always work out, but every once in a while you might get somebody. Dimir Locket. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Locket since we talked about them at length yesterday in the Boros video, but I will say this, where the Boros Locket probably isn't as good actually in the Boros deck, this is fine in the Dimir deck. Fixing colors, ramping a little bit is good. You might not want to dilute your strategy, so be careful. Like, don't run this just to run it, but because of the card draw here, I think most of the time you're going to be very safe. Yes, early on, if you need to fix what you're doing, wonderful. It ramps you and gives you the color selection. Later on, when you just don't need it anymore, pay 4, it replaces itself and lets you go a card deeper. That's pretty good. If you're not playing Dimir, then this is a good way to splash the other color if you're playing a different deck. Dimir Guild Gates. Yep, same thing here. This does slow you down a little bit, but I'm usually happy to play it. Even within the Dimir deck, just getting a little more consistency at the risk of losing some speed is going to be fine with me. Now, beyond that, I like these even better when I'm splashing again. So if I'm not in the Dimir build, but I need to splash the other color, these will be great for you. Also, we talked about the gate strategy, or 4 or 5 color good stuff could be a thing as well. Watery Grave. Okay, what's better than Guild Gates? Well, a Shockland, of course. Does all the same thing the Guild Gates do, but sometimes it comes into play untapped if you're okay taking the 2 damage. I will warn you, though, there's some aggressive stuff going on in this environment. If you're up against Boros or Izzet, you may wish later that you didn't take the 2 damage. However, I'm going to still play this. I'm not going to let that stop me. But if I'm up against one of those matchups, I might be more likely to have this come into play tapped. Even if I do have a follow-up play, I might slow down just a little bit to be safe. Alright, with that being said, that is part 2 of our Guilds of Ravnica set review. Tomorrow, we're going to be back looking at the rest of the red cards and all of the Izzet watermark cards. Until then, though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.